to has been extraordinary, energizing, inspiring, focusing, creating a sense of urgency. And I want to say to Jane, to Bernie, to Dave, to everyone at the Sanders Institute, thank you for gathering us here in common purpose and for focusing on how we can cross all those lines, get rid of all those silos, get rid of all that misdirection and go in one direction as purposeful progressives. So this gathering already is setting a tone and setting a focus that we need, not only for our nation, but internationally as well. We as mayors, we have a special sense of urgency. It is something we signed up for. We signed up for 24/7 lifestyle. We signed up for a focus on the big fundamental issues of social change and the pothole on someone's street, or the sidewalk that's broken, or the person who needs a job to feed their family. We signed up for the whole thing. And progressive mayors understand that if we're going to make bigger change, we have to do things that people will feel in their lives. We have to show them that progressive change affects their family, their block, their workplace. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the things that each of us has done in our cities that actually fight the cynicism and the hopelessness, that show people elections do matter, change can come, and it can reach your life. Each of my colleagues here has done extraordinary things, and each of them is just getting started. You're going to hear from them in a moment. I want to just give you a quick perspective from New York City. And I want to start by saying, like every great progressive story, it began with people saying to all of us, it could not be done. We weren't supposed to get elected, and if we elected, we were supposed to fall flat on our face because we had big dreams, bold ideas, audacious ideas, and what we hear all the time from the mainstream and the forces of status quo is don't even bother. It can't be done. You're aiming too high. It'll backfire. Whatever words you choose, we hear incessantly what we cannot do. They try to take away our power from us. They try to talk us out of our own power. They can only talk us out of our power if we let them. And what's so powerful about this gathering is it's reminding us of what we have all achieved in our communities and what we are capable of. So when I ran, I said we needed pre-K for every child in New York City. We needed every child 4 years old to get a free, high-quality early childhood education. I heard an extraordinary, powerful chorus of doubting Thomases say that was physically impossible. We couldn't fund it. We couldn't put together the space and the teachers. It wouldn't work. The day I took office in New York City, 20,000 4-year-olds in our city were getting full-day pre-K. Today, 70,000 4-year-olds get full-day pre-K in New York City. It not only could be done, we were able to make that transformation in 2 years' time. We were able to add an entire additional grade to our school system. And you know what? We as progressives need to then think when we see we can achieve something, we should immediately aim even higher. So in the next few years in New York City, we're going to have 3K for all. Every 3-year-old will get an early childhood education for free in our city. We said that the greatest challenge when it came to health care was the piece of the equation that was not even being discussed, that was not even being admitted, was not even being recognized: mental health. And I want to give credit to our First Lady, my partner, the love of my life, Chirlane McCray. Because she said we cannot fix the problem unless we address it, put it up front, destigmatize it, make it a topic of conversation everywhere, whether it's in people's living rooms or whether it's from the pulpit or it's in our schools. And now we have Thrive NYC, literally reaching for full access to mental health care for all New Yorkers. One place you can call, whatever your problem, and get access to mental health care. And all the while taking away a stigma that was holding back people from even being willing to make that call. I can't tell you how many people said it would never work. How many people said this issue, people won't understand, they won't care. I have never seen people care more than about mental health, because 1 in 5 of us, 1 in 5 Americans, which basically means every family, every community is affected. And now we have Thrive NYC. I'll give you one more example. A lot of you know in our city, like so many cities, there was extraordinary tension between police and community. There were too many times when there were tragedies. There were too many times when our young men of color, in particular, were treated like suspects to a crime they never committed. There was a policy of stop and frisk that was holding us back, that was broken, was unconstitutional, it was discriminatory. When we said we would get rid of that, again, every doubter and naysayer and opponent came forward, and the mainstream media was all aflutter with the notion that if you got rid of stop and frisk, the next stop would be chaos and crime and disorder. But here's what we learned. It was actually stop and frisk that was standing in the way of becoming a safer city, because if we could not get police and community to feel mutual respect and a common bond, we couldn't get safer. We got rid of stop and frisk. And year after year after year, New York City has gotten safer. Safer because we got rid of it. And I want you to hear one statistic because it makes me very proud. Last year in New York City, we had 100,000 fewer arrests than 4 years earlier. 100,000 fewer arrests. And crime went down. And to everyone here who cares about ending the crisis of mass incarceration, I suggest if we want to end mass incarceration, let's stop arresting people who don't need to be arrested in the first place. Last point I want to make, because it's something all of us have grappled with. Every single person here and a whole lot of people in this audience have fought when the rules of the game weren't fair. You know, one of the things that Bernie and Jane have done that I particularly value is when they talked about the game being rigged, when they talked about the rules themselves not being fair. They woke up this country to a reality that people felt but they had not heard articulated so clearly. And they obviously showed us that we could have a different set of rules for our elections and the way we organize people. But it's crucial that we all, in our cities and towns and states, change the rules every chance we get. So this November in New York City, we had on the ballot a simple idea. Let's lower the amount of money that any big donor can spend. Let's reward the small donors with matching funds, $8 match for every small donation given. Every single small dollar gets matched 8 to 1 with public funds now in New York City. And this means now in our city, you will be able to run for office without ever talking to a big donor, without ever having to turn to a rich person. That's the kind of change we need to make that will open the doors for so much more. So let me turn to my colleagues, and I have to say they've all been extraordinary change makers. I want to start with Mayor Michael Tubbs, because he understood that the status quo in Stockton, California didn't have to exist, no matter how many times he heard that was just the way it was. He understood that violence could be confronted. He understood that communities could be developed a different way. He understood that people could be empowered and mobilized. And he himself particularly had the ability to reach younger members of the community and tell them that their voices mattered too. I want you to hear the story of Stockton, California, Mayor Michael Tubbs.
Well, lucky me, I get to go after the mayor of New York City. But in all seriousness, thank you so much to Jane and the Sanders Institute. I was reflecting last night, and I realized the things we fight for were things that were so important to me now, but even more so 20 years ago. So before I was mayor, I was a poor, young, a black child on the south side of Stockton with an incarcerated father and a mother who had me at 16 years old as a teenager. So the things we fight for, like affordable health care, affordable child care, entitlement programs like WIC and Head Start, all paved the way for me to be on the stage today. So I want to start by thanking all of you, the activists, the thinkers, the organizers, for creating a world that we know is not perfect, but could be worse, and that the fact we're here today is to push and to bend the moral arc of the universe. So I want to start by saying thank you. So Stockton, California is a city in the Central Valley of California. It's about 320,000 people. It's between San Francisco and Sacramento, about an hour and a half away from Silicon Valley, and about an hour away from Sacramento. And it's incredibly diverse. My city is 35 to 40% Latino, 35% white, 10% African American, 15 to 20% Asian. Our city is also ideologically diverse, 60% Democrat, 40% Republican, which means a lot of things we're doing that are progressive aren't happening in liberal bastions, but are happening in tough conversations with people who may not agree with me on every national choice and decision. And to the mayor's point, I think we organize ourselves in Stockton around three main tenets. Number one, that indeed the status quo is unacceptable. And since it is unacceptable, we have a mandate, we have a duty, we have an obligation to do something to make it better. The second tenet that organizes our work is this idea of structural violence. I remember reading Mountains Beyond Mountains, and Dr. Paul Farmer talked about structural violence as the avoidable impairment of basic human needs. So my administration, we organize ourselves around the idea that government can't do everything, but we have to do something to solve structural violence, because I would argue a lot of the violence we see in our streets are just symptoms of a deeper structural issue, that it's no stranger, it's not a surprise that we could pinpoint neighborhoods in every city in this country where you expect to see high rates of gun violence. And why is that? Because they have low rates of literacy, they have more liquor stores and grocery stores, they have more check cashing places and banks, they have zero jobs. They are, as we like to say in Stockton, they're oftentimes high in everything bad and low in everything good. And it's not necessarily the individual choices that people are making. And our third kind of governing and organizing frame in Stockton is, as government, the most important investment we can make is actually in our people. That cities aren't buildings, they aren't stadiums, they aren't new developments, but they're people, flesh and blood people, and all our people. So folks who are rich and folks who are poor, folks who are documented, folks who aren't documented, folks who are young, folks who are old, folks who speak English and folks who are learning, the only Stockton is nothing more than its people. And because of that, over the past 2 years, we've been engaged in a very bold and audacious, not really an experiment, but a demonstration case about what does it mean to really invest in people. So the first kind of big thing we did is we started a universal college scholarship called the Stockton Scholars Program. And essentially, starting this May, every senior from our largest school district, Stockton Unified, about 40,000 students, for at least the next decade, and we're working on figuring out what to do with revenues to extend it in perpetuity, but for the next decade is guaranteed tuition-free college, essentially. So that means if you're a graduating senior, you get into a CSU Stanislaus, Cal State Stanislaus, or Sac State, or State University system, or UC Berkeley, UC Davis, you're guaranteed $1,000 a year, every year for 4 years, and all you have to do is be accepted. And that number of $1,000 is so important because in working with the UC Chancellor's office, we found that given the high rates of poverty in the community, that's $1,000, that's the tuition gap between a kid from Stockton going to college tuition free. So that's why it's $1,000. And then for students who want to go to community college first, they're given $500 a year, for 2 years. And for students who want to go to trade school or to building trades, they're given a toolbox scholarship and they're given $500 a year for 2 years. And the message we're saying to our students is that we're not going to tell you what to do, but after high school, you have to do something, and not just you have to do it, we'll make sure it's affordable for you and do everything we can to make it happen. And that's super important, especially in Stockton, because according to the Brookings Institute, of the top 100 metro areas in this country, we're number 99 currently in terms of percentage of adults with a 4-year degree or higher. which explains some of our issues with poverty, which explains some of our issues with economic development, which explains some of our issues with some of the civic discourse we have. So the goal is that with this investment over the next 10 years, we'll triple the number of Stockton students who graduate college and career ready, because to Mayor de Blasio's point, I think one of my favorite theorists said, be realistic and demand the impossible. I don't want to say their name because on Twitter they'd be like, anyway. So the second thing we're doing to invest in people are two parallel programs called Advanced Peace and Ceasefire. And the idea is that not just in Stockton, but in every community of more than 50,000 or 100,000 people, there's pockets of crime and poverty that also have high rates of gun violence. So for the past 28 years, so my entire life, Stockton has been double the state average for shootings and homicides. And 92% of those shootings and homicides have been young men of color. 42% have actually been African American men, despite the fact black men only make up 4 to 5% of our population. And this is really personal to me, and it's actually the reason why I decided to come back and run for office in Stockton, because 8 years ago, one of my cousins was murdered in Stockton at a house party. So accordingly, we spend a lot of time, and to the mayor's point, the easy solution is, say, bigger jails, more cops, more arrests, more contact. But we flipped the frame in Stockton and said, well, looking at the data, it's not all 320,000 people. It's less than 1% of our population. It's 200 guys in our city that at any point are the most likely to be victims and perpetrators of violent crime. And I say victims and perpetrators purposely, because oftentimes folks who are shooting have been shot at. Oftentimes folks who are shooting have endured trauma from the time they were young, and they all have buried loved ones, buried friends, been shooting and live on the edge, and also have a lot of unresolved trauma. So what we've decided to do is engage these guys and say, listen, we understand the community is not perfect. We understand that everything's not right. We understand you've gone through trauma in your life. But we also understand on the flip side that violence is unacceptable. So here's what we want to do. What can we do to lift barriers? Understanding it's not going to be easy. Understanding it's going to be incredibly hard, but you have a community that's willing to walk and work with you. So the first program, Ceasefire, we call them in once a month or once a quarter, myself, clergy, the police chief, and the message is we need you alive and free. That our community is great when you're great, so what can we do to help you? And jails and cops aren't going anywhere. We still have those tools, but we want to use some new tools. So what if we connect you with our service providers, our mental health clinicians, et cetera, et cetera. The second program, which is a little more controversial, is a program called Advanced Peace, and it's layered on top of that. And it says, well, for the guys who are the quote-unquote worst of the worst, so the guys who are actively holding firearms and shooting but have evaded arrest, that we have to engage them with street outreach, engage them with 6 days a week case management, and after 6 months, engage them with a cash stipend to be a fellow. And as a fellow, they're responsible for creating life maps and creating goals. They're responsible for keeping the peace. So it's like a job. But again, the investment is that every time there's a shooting, it costs our city and county $500,000. So a small $1,000 stipend to reward somebody for getting back on track, to reward somebody for doing the right thing, for providing a job or opportunity is the best investment we can make. And the last thing we're doing in Stockton, which is probably even more, it's not controversial to me, but it seems to be garnering a lot of attention. I've talked with the luminary Sarah Palin and Chuck Woolery about this concept, is that literally we're piloting a basic income demonstration in Stockton. And again, And again, the premise is that poverty is at the crux of all our issues. I remember in college reading Dr. King, and he said, I'm now convinced that the most simplest way to abolish poverty is the most direct. Give people cash. And I'll be honest, when we first were discussing this, I was a little bit nervous. I was like, well, what if we gave them this, or what if we gave them that? And then I had to check myself and said, well, as a mayor and as a leader, if I don't believe in my people to make right choices, then why am I leading? If I don't believe in the capacity of the folks in Stockton, if I don't think poverty is caused by a lack of character but a lack of cash, then why would I trust people to make the right choices? So make a long story short, starting in February, at least 100 families who make at or below the city median income of $46,000 will be given $500 a month for 18 months, no strings attached, to pilot a guaranteed income. And the idea is to kind of play out what previous studies suggest, that often when people get money, drug use and alcohol use goes down, because oftentimes alcohol and drug abuse is Not because people are poor, but because people are stressed and anxious and tired. So we predict to see that. We predict to see folks being able to stabilize, given the rising housing costs in California. Folks be able to stabilize for rent increases. We expect to see that kids are able to be in school more because their homes are more stable. And we expect to see amazing stories of the people of Stockton showing that with opportunity. Because, and you guys know this, but people are working. Like, that's why you have a whole term called the working poor. 44% of poor people work full-time. There's people driving Uber, Lyft, door dashing, working, doing childcare, and still can't pay bills. And oftentimes the controversy is around this concept we have of the dignity of work. And I would argue that a person's dignity is not attached to work or what they produce, but it's attached to their humanity. And that there's And the last thing I'll say is I remember 8 years ago I was on the Freedom Rides with some of the original Freedom Riders. And one guy, Bob Singleton, he looked at me and he said he was born on August 4th, 1961. Why is that day important? And I said, well, you were arrested. If you weren't arrested, we wouldn't be here. And then he said, on that day, Barack Obama was born. And then he said he had no idea that the choices he made as a 19-year-old would pave the way so a child born 50 years later had the chance to be president. And then he looked at me and said a question I think motivates all of us here today and why the work we're doing is so important. He said, what are you prepared to do today so that 50 years from now a child born has more opportunity than you had? And that's, I think, is the charge before us. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very, very much, Michael. I'm going to turn to my two colleagues so you can hear from them. And we're going to do a little discourse here, but I do want to also get it out to the assembled group here and give people a chance to ask some questions. So get your questions in your mind. So Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz, known everywhere as Yulín, Mayor of San Juan, and before Hurricane Maria, she was a profound change agent. Before Hurricane Maria, she was taking on the austerity crisis, and she was making things happen on the ground in San Juan despite maximum negative interference from the federal government and often her own government in the Commonwealth as well. So she knows how to not only fight but to turn adversity into action. I'm very proud of the fact that during and after the hurricane, because for New York City, San Juan is, you know, we couldn't feel closer either. There are 6 boroughs or we're there. Well, I don't know how many boroughs you have, but we sent down hundreds of city workers who volunteered. We gave them the time off. We gave them the support to go down and help the people of Puerto Rico. And they were all based in San Juan, and it was a labor of love and solidarity. So
you're going to make me cry.
I want you to cry because, you know, it's something beautiful happening. But amidst a very, very painful reality. So here is a progressive that has, if anyone's been to the front line, it's Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz. Yulín, take it away.
Can I ask if we could turn up the lights so I can see you people?
Yeah, the video people are not going to like that.
Are not going to like it. Well, you know, it's our job to make people uncomfortable. Let me first begin by saying thank you to Jane, Dave, to Bill, to the people in New York. I used to love New York. Now I adore New York. Because they put into practice something that on a day like today is very important, and I'll take it where you left it. On a day like today, Rosa Parks said, enough. I'm not giving my seat to a white man. Now, it was planned. This didn't happen by accident. This was a purposely put into place plan to have change. Now, Cesar Chavez used to say, once social change has begun, you can't stop it. You can't, and I'll paraphrase, you can't uneducate a person that has learned to read. You cannot put down a person that feels proud, and you cannot control a person that feels no fear. So I've never been called a progressive until this weekend. I've been called a communist, a socialist. I am so glad I'm among those people that understand what it is to put a good fight for the right reasons at the right time. And let me just get something out of the way right away, because I know you're all thinking about it. I'll tell you what a nasty woman is. It is what a president calls a woman that can get the shit done that he cannot get done.
Come on.
That's what it is. So with that out of the way, it makes me feel good to say that every time. But there are a couple of things that I've never been the person that the political structure says is going to win. I've never been the person that the political structure has embraced. You know, I campaigned with Harley Davidson boots, because I used to have a Harley Davidson, with a bandana, lots of strings on my left hand, not because I'm from the left, which I am, but because I'm heavily dyslexic. And a very wonderful teacher taught me that I wasn't strange, that I was not stupid, that I just had something different from everybody else. So a little string on my left hand was going to make it right. Now, I come from a very traditional, conservative, right-wing family, if you can believe that. So that little left string led a lot more than my direction in terms of geography. Little by little, I started understanding that the power is in the streets. El poder está en la calle. It is all about the people's agenda. It isn't my agenda as mayor that's important. It's about the people's agenda. And it is about how we provide a platform in government for people to make their dreams come true. This is not poetry. This is reality. So perhaps for a person that has severe disability, a dream come true is to have a part-time job. Well, we ought to make sure that we are a platform for that. So what have we done in San Juan? I also understood that I was never going to get elected unless I was elected under a coalition of people. So I spoke to everyone that every other politician had put aside. I spoke to the union laborers, believe it or not. We are the only municipality in all of Puerto Rico out of 78 that recognized the right of their employees to be unionized and to have collective bargaining. We are the only place in Puerto Rico right now, including the central government, where a collective bargaining process is taking place. Because by a legislation that was passed by the current government of Puerto Rico, the right to collective bargain was taken away from all the Puerto Rican public servants. So I had to go to court 4 times, not 1, 4 times, until the Supreme Court of Puerto Rico acknowledged the right of the municipality of San Juan to afford its employees the opportunity to decide whether they wanted to be represented or not. In the midst of that, I also had a couple of complaints, you know, FBI complaints, ethics complaints, just because I was trying to give workers the ability to decide whether they wanted to be organized or not. We are the only municipality in all of Puerto Rico that has a water therapy treatment program for children with highly diverse functionalities, with disabled children. When I said that I wanted to do that, people looked at me like, you're crazy. And every time somebody looks at us like we're crazy, we know we're in the right track. That's what that means. Because it means that there are some people that nobody else has looked at. And that breaks. See, in Puerto Rico, it's not so much about the color of your skin. You know, we're all black, white, indigenous Taino. I mean, if I can dance the way I dance, it's because African blood runs through my veins. You know, that's why I have the gusto that I have there and other places. But it's important to know that we embrace our diversity. It's more about upward mobility. I am the great-granddaughter of a sugarcane plantation worker. My grandmother just clawed her way out of poverty because she had one single thing: education. Education. And that is one of the most important things for us. So people have to be educated, but they also have to have the opportunity to go out of this system and circle and on and on and on. So we put together what we call the Hope Brigade, La Brigada de la Esperanza. These are people that have been discarded. They don't know how to read or write, which in Puerto Rico, if you're a public servant, you have to know how to read or write, but we don't provide you with an opportunity to learn to do it at the larger scale than we should. There are survivors of domestic violence, men and women, mostly women, unfortunately, but there are some men. And there are people that have received certain licensing while they have been incarcerated. So the government pays about $9,000 for that to get a license, to get a job when they come outside. But then when they come outside, they don't get a job because they don't have a clean record. So how stupid is that? You make a person get able to have a job, but once you're outside, because you paid your price, that's it. So this Hope Brigade is comprised of people that nobody would give a second chance to. 4 days a week, they work in the municipality. On the 5th day, they get paid by the municipality, but they work in a personal development program. They learned how to read or write. They receive mental health care if they are survivors of domestic violence or any other type. We deal with them with their children, problems that they have. We get them a home, and we make sure that they graduate past 2 years into becoming a permanent part of the municipality workforce. We're also, I did something that was unheard of. I signed 21 co-op agreements with 21 different groups and organizations. The LGBT community, we have the only transgender clinic in all of Puerto Rico. Wow. The only transgender clinic, and I was called the daughter of the devil when I was putting this forward. We've kept it somewhat quiet because we don't want people to have to deal with the minuscule heart and souls of those that don't understand that we are all the same, that who we love and what we feel we are does not matter. You know, I gave birth yesterday, 28 years ago in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Ada gave birth in Barcelona. I'm sure we felt the same pain unless we used enough drugs so that we... But it's the same pain that giving birth in Vermont. We are the same kind of people. We want the same things. I've never heard a young child say, when I grow up, I want to be a prostitute or I want to be a drug dealer. Nobody says that. Nobody wants that. There are situations that force people into making choices that they don't want to make for themselves. So one of the things that we've also done is we have provided for immigrant population prenatal care for women that don't have the documents to be in Puerto Rico. Why? Because it's a human being. And as long as you breathe, all of our clinics, San Juan has 7 clinics and a hospital, they're all sanctuaries. And I'm so glad that New York took that step to fighting President Trump and winning one for all of us, because we're all the same. So one last thing I'm going to say. We did participatory budgeting in Puerto Rico, in San Juan, because we copied it shamelessly from New York City. The then Speaker of the House, Melissa Mark Viverito, introduced me to Bill de Blasio, and we worked through it, and we adapted it through our own. So one of the greatest things that happens is not what has happened here in these 2 days, which have been great. I feel like I've put my finger in a socket and I've gotten energized because finally I don't feel like the odd kid in the room. But we have to do something to become ambassadors of this new way of thinking and of this progressive way of thinking when we go outside. We have to do mini gatherings all over the United States, all over the world, to understand that we're all in this together, and that if they won't push and push hard and push beyond our pain and are uncompromising, bold, and unapologetic, we will not get it done beyond this room. And when we don't get it done, people die. We know. 3,000 of us died because a man didn't have the heart to do his job. because he turned his backs on us, and the political class in Puerto Rico, for the major part of it, decided to play along. When we don't do our job in making others feel uncomfortable when they don't do theirs, people die. And it has to stop.
Thank you so much, Aline. Now I want to turn to Mayor Ada Colau of Barcelona. And a lot of you heard yesterday, this is someone who understood a crisis, decided there were entirely different ways to address what was happening after the Great Recession, what was happening to people in her city who were being foreclosed, who were being evicted. She believed that an entirely different fight could be built to save people and save the city that she loved. Mayor Ada Colau.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, all of you. As you know, housing is a challenge that affects all of us, New York, Barcelona, San Jose, I'm sure.
Stockton.
Stockton. And that's why in July, in Barcelona and in New York and many other cities like London, Mexico, Paris, presented a joint declaration to the United Nations. In that declaration, we called for more powers to regulate the property market and more resources to increase affordable housing. We cities cooperate, we mayors cooperate, because cities have limited powers to stop gentrification. But at the same time, we have to use every tool that we have to stop evictions and rent rises, because our neighborhoods depend on it. A city without its people, it's a dead city, a city without a future. And believe me that I know what I'm talking about, because I'm a renter, and my rent has increased by 30% only this year, and I'm the mayor, so you can, the situation is dramatic, you can see. That's why in Barcelona, we recently passed a law that forces constructors to make 30% of all new housing affordable. I know that New York already has similar rules, on also Paris or London, and for us it's very, very important to learn from them. In Barcelona, we are doing more for housing than any other level of government in Spain. And it's important to say that before mayor, I was an activist on housing rights and against evictions. So you can imagine that people have high expectations of me. Every day I think, what can I do? What can I do more and more? No? And now the central government has cut housing investment by 70%, while we have tripled the city housing budget. With fewer resources, we are covering the responsibilities of other levels of government. For the first time, we have said in public that vulture investment funds are not welcome in Barcelona. For example, we are trying to make it more difficult for them to operate in our city. We have passed a new rule that forces constructors to maintain the conditions of tenants when they renovate a building. We have fined banks for having empty properties in our city to prevent speculation. We have created an anti-evictions unit that has prevented thousands and thousands of evictions in the last 2 years. But it's not enough. We are proving that it wasn't true when they said that nothing could be done. With political will, we have made changes. But we know there is still more to do. We need to come together as cities and demand that the central government changes national laws to protect the right to housing. Because it is cities who are managing the consequences of the failures of the other levels of governments. The laws on evictions and rent are made by the central government. But when someone is evicted, they come to us. When they can't afford to pay the rent, they come to us. And we want to respond, we want, but we need powers and resources. So I say to President Sanchez, you have two choices. Or you regulate rent and stop speculation, or you give me the power to do it, and I won't hesitate. O sí, por las buenas o por las malas.
I believe Mayor Colau will not hesitate. I get that feeling. Okay, very quick, I want to say the mention was made by Yulene of a victory that's a victory for all of us. We're very proud to say New York City joined with others. We went at the Trump administration, we sued them over trying to withhold security funding to keep people safe from cities in America like New York, because we respected the rights of immigrants, because we would not ask immigrants their documentation status. And when the Trump administration came out with their rule, we said that's just plain unconstitutional. Well, guess what the judge said yesterday? That's unconstitutional. So we will not ask documentation status. We will respect people, and we will keep people safe because of it. Look, what I want to do now, I'm going to do 1 minute each. 1 minute each, so then we can open up. I'll start. I want everyone to say how you specifically achieved one of the things that you set out to do, how you either built the coalition, where you got the votes, how you overcame the opposition. Just one simple vignette. Here's mine. Pre-K for all. We made it the #1 issue in our campaign. I want to say to all good progressives, if you want people to understand something, talk about it all the time, say it's the #1 priority. We were going to tax the wealthy. Our vision was tax the wealthiest New Yorkers to pay for pre-K. I needed approval in the state legislature in Albany. Shockingly, the Republican-led state Senate would not approve a tax on the wealthy for pre-K in New York City. A lot of Democrats also ran away from that idea, and that needs to be remembered too. We said, if you're not going to give us a tax on the wealthy, what are you going to do? And of course, everyone in our state capital tried to come up with some plan that would take a long, long time. We said, no, we need pre-K for our children right now. We created so much political pressure by building momentum within our city that everyone was asking about. And I want people to understand that it didn't matter if someone, this was universal. The poorest New Yorkers who had means, everyone wanted pre-K. Everyone needed pre-K. I can't tell you how many parents have come up to me and said, I didn't know where I'd find a place for my child. I didn't know if I could afford it. I didn't know if it would be a good place. Everyone had the same yearning. Everyone felt the same stress. It became inexorable. It became a kind of momentum that no one in Albany could look away from. And what they ended up doing, they had to fund the program that we proposed as it was, and now it's universal. That's how we got it done. Michael, give us one.
I'll give you 30 seconds. The gun violence reduction program, essentially relationship building and bringing together unlikely allies. So some of the most conservative parts of the community, some of the most liberal parts of the communities, a group of teachers who have been present for the first school shooting and mass school shooting in 1989 in Cleveland School in Stockton, our sports teams, everyone. Had them come to the council and say, listen, gun violence is our top priority, it's unacceptable, we have a responsibility to do whatever we can. And then a lot of relationship building and calling philanthropy to come partner with us so we can make it work.
Well done. Well done.
In my case, I've always been known in Puerto Rico for having a big mouth and saying what I believe in, no matter what the consequences, which is not bad after all. But I stopped thinking about winning, and I started thinking about talking about the right thing and talking about the right people and doing the right alliances. And when I stopped thinking, you know, the first year of my administration, I'm on my second term, was horrible because I started thinking about losing. And what am I going to do? And if I do this, maybe I'll lose and people will get upset. Then one of my mother told me, I don't know whether you're trying to be somebody or not. And it was like that wisdom that comes over a hot meal that you haven't had in weeks. And I decided I'm going to be who I am. You know that song, I am what I am, and what I am needs no excuses. And when I started doing that, I'm a trailer park mayor. I don't go to City Hall. I have an office at City Hall, but I literally have a trailer in a park, which is my office. We have a common office. People just knock on the door. Now I have 300,000 people. Bill couldn't do that, or Ada could not do that because they couldn't get anything done. You and I probably
I don't think I could either. I got to concentrate sometimes.
But it was understanding that I was there under a very different concept. I believe that if you follow, people will allow you to lead them. And I'll say that again. If you follow, people will allow you to lead them. So you have to always be listening. I have a small bus that it's a makeshift office and literally go into the neighborhoods. Now, look, I'm heavily criticized because I'm different than anybody else. And I had to make a choice. After Hurricane Maria, I had to decide whether I wanted to take food, medication, and water to people. The people from New York didn't ask me for a memo like FEMA did. They just walked in and said, we're from New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio told me to find you, and we're here to help you. And that's what happens when humanity meets humanity. We know what needs to be done. We just have to break all the red tape and the barriers of what needs to be done. And children could go back to school because the people from New York were there to help us navigate through very difficult FEMA system. FEMA sucks, by the way.
This just in.
Yes.
What? We're here in Burlington with a revelation.
But basically, it was this understanding that it wasn't my agenda, that it was the people's agenda, and that I was an instrument for that agenda, and that it takes a lot of talking. We talk a lot to convince people. The transgender clinic was not there initially to help people transition from one sex to another. But I had a couple that came with their child, beautiful young woman, just try to commit suicide. They came to ask, Mayor, could you help us? So what are you going to do? Either you're in it for the right reasons or you're not in it for the right reasons. And the last thing I'll say is we talk to everybody and tell them the difference between accepting and tolerating. We tolerate what we think is different, but it doesn't bother me too much. But we have to accept each other, and we can't allow our differences to be a difference or a gate holding us from staying with one another. We have to make sure that what we do, and we push the agenda forward. And that's basically it.
Amen. Well done. Ada.
I agree with Yulin. It's people's agenda, and in fact, in our case, we are a minority government, so everything we've achieved is thanks to Barcelona's active and demanding neighborhoods, associations, and movements. Before I spoke about the measure guaranteeing 30% of affordable housing. That's what made possible thanks to social movements, the anti-evictions platform, and the tenants' union. Or, for example, we can fight to take Barcelona's water company back under public control because water activists collected over 15,000 signatures supporting a citizen vote on the question. No? It's some examples. Or, for example, about tourism, and we need to regulate tourism, and we can step up to Airbnb because people are organizing in neighborhoods affected by mass tourism and demanding better regulation. No? And I think we have to work together, no? Because this relationship isn't always easy. It's clear, no? For many years, we lost trust in government, and of course, social movements must always be critical and independent, and whoever is in government, also with us, of course, no? I was clear when I became mayor that I was no longer an activist. I have the same goals, but I have to play a different role. No? But now asking me, and we want, I think it's in plural, no? We want to keep exploring how to build a relationship based on shared goals and collaboration, because our government doesn't have media or economic power. We only have people power. And that's why we need a government that listens, an active and organized society. But we know that it's not enough to implement progressive politics because government change, no? So we need to change the political culture. No? We need a culture of responsibility. We need, so that there is a shared responsibility between governments, movements, and citizens. If we achieve an important policy victory, it's up to all of us to defend it. And we need this new culture, I think.
Amen. Yes. Amen. All right. Well done. Ada makes a point. I just want to put a point out because we said at the beginning, if we want to sustain progressive movements, we have to produce for the people we are here to represent. Yes. It is not abstract exercise. It's not intellectual. It is we have to produce. Every one of us was trying to put forward ideas that actually came to be, that actually change people's lives. And then that gives faith that progressives can make more change. But we all, you can hear, every one of us understands we are lucky to have gotten there and we have to use every moment to make tangible change in people's lives. The only way there will be more license and more empowerment of our fellow progressives is if we succeed. And so this urgency is something I know everyone feels, but I hope everyone can bring it to your own communities and make an impact. Let's open it up for some quick questions, but everyone kind of lightning round with me so that we can get as many in as possible. Yeah, we're going to get you a microphone, I believe.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Josh Fox. I was born in New York City. I grew up playing in the clubs, CBGBs, Ludlow Street,
that's pretty
theaters.
Cool.
And that arts education that I got on the streets of New York City led me to making films like Gasland that were seen by hundreds of millions of people.
Okay, lightning round me, brother. Lightning round me.
I have watched artists flee New York City.
Yeah.
Be inhospitable and hostile to artists. We are we are invariably displaced by big business. So my question is two parts. Number one, how does this Amazon deal reconcile with our values? Yeah. And number two, can we use this forum, which I have so appreciated and love, to generate $1.5 billion to bring artists back to New York City so that we can regain our status as cultural capital of the world, which we are no longer? And how do we fix that problem? Because the art is what makes New York City what it is.
I'm going to try and keep people moving around and answer, but again, I'll answer this one, but other questions, please try and make it for the whole panel. First of all, I lovingly contest that we're not still the arts capital of the world. My colleagues can each have their own view, but I think we're an extraordinary cultural capital for all kinds of culture, all kinds of arts. Look, the bottom line is we preserve and protect artistic communities in our city with the creation of affordable housing, with the improvement of wages and benefits, all the things we're doing, raising the minimum wage, providing paid sick leave, all the things that give people, if they are a full-time artist or a part-time artist, the possibility of having a decent standard of living so they can pursue their vision, their dream. We do it with arts education in school, which we've greatly intensified, after-school programs that teach the arts and employ artists. All these pieces matter. Why? Look, I want to say on Amazon, I think everyone in this room could easily mount a critique of corporate America writ large, Amazon in specific. I sure could too. The question for all of us was, if we were going to get an opportunity to bring a lot of jobs to our city that would help create opportunity for people who come out of our public schools, of our public colleges, of our public housing, we had to do that, but also for the revenue. And here's something we all understand as progressives. We have to generate the tax revenue to pay for public housing, to pay for affordable housing programs, to pay for things like pre-K and 3K. There's always a balance point. The mental health program that my wife has started is $800 million plus. We need the revenue to make progressive change. And sometimes we do see an opportunity to get that from our interaction with the private sector, not always on rules that we agree with, by the way. And the final thing I'd say is, the question that Bernie raised the other day, I think is a powerful one. There is a race to the bottom in America, city against city, state against state for jobs. It's not going to be solved in one place. It has to be solved nationally. There should not be these kind of programs for corporations if we had a national policy that addressed it. Otherwise, it does pit city against city and state against state, and that's what we have to overcome. Other questions?
One to the right.
Where we go? Right there? Yeah.
Is it on? Okay, hi. I'll make it quick, and with all due respect to the gentleman, I would just like to say gracias a ustedes dos, porque es tan importante ver unas mujeres tan guerreras, porque han prestado un ejemplo para nosotras que se lo agradezco del alma. My name is Cindy Polo. I am a newly elected representative in the state of Florida. A seat And I say that not to brag. I say that mostly to, I filed in March. It wasn't part of a lifelong plan. And I brought down the Cuban Republican Mafia in Northwest Miami-Dade. And so my question, and part of it is about celebrating these small victories that we had, because in Florida we have a long way to go, but there were a few shining moments. And so to you four as leaders, how and have you started preparing who is going to take over your office when you have decided to move on? Because we continue to talk about building the bench, but I'll tell you, everyone loves an underdog story, and I'm very proud to be one of them, but I should be not one of 6 seats that we flipped. I should have been one of 25, and sometimes we are up against our own people. And so have you already identified who's going to take your steps whenever you decide to move on?
Amen. Everyone want to jump in?
In my case, I say all the times that I think only to be in the institution, it's my first time, because I never in my life participate in institutional politics. It's my first time. I'm mayor for 3 years and a half, and we have next elections on next May.
So we would like you to succeed you
yes.
first.
Only one time. For this time, I present my ¿cómo se dice otra vez? Another time, no?
For re-election.
For re-election. I present myself for re-election. But there's a lot of brave people in our team, and I'm sure that we have a lot of people that can make ¿cómo se dice relevo?
The relay.
Oh my God. Pues eso.
Who can step up? We'll say it in the colloquial, who can step up. The one quick point also, it is not just who's going to take our job. It's also credentialing, preparing everyone else we work with for a whole lot of other roles in the movement, roles in government. One of the things I've been shocked by is just how many people we could bring in who think like us and give them the opportunity to make an impact and gain skills so they can provide a higher level of leadership. One day in 1991, Shirlane McRae walked up to me in City Hall in New York City, because we were both working for Mayor Dinkins, first African-American mayor of New York City. He was never supposed to win that election. He won. He gave opportunities to folks like us to serve in government who had never been there before. We're trying to do that now on a much bigger level. And a lot of those folks will turn into candidates as well. All right, let's see if there's someone else out there. Right over here.
I just want to say thank you, first of all. Utterly inspiring, especially the ladies. I just absolutely amazing.
We dressed alike, didn't we?
And it's a question for Ada. So I'm a first-generation immigrant. I now live in the tourist city of Oxford. And I'm a city councillor for the poorest part of the city. The equation between providing housing for the working classes and rights of immigrants, asylum seekers, are often brought together into a zero-sum game. I would like to know how you changed that conflation.
La competencia, ¿no? Entre, ¿sí? It's an important question, so I prefer to speak in Spanish, and Kate, my friend, help us with translation, okay? No, porque es un tema muy importante, ¿no? It's a very important issue. Con el discurso de la extrema derecha de generar el enemigo fácil en las personas migrantes.
The far right has a narrative that creates an enemy in foreigners.
Entonces, y el discurso es muy fácil, por lo tanto, comunica muy fuerte, ¿no? Porque dicen, vienen a competir por los recursos escasos que hay en nuestras ciudades, ¿no?
And it's a very simple, easy message that says that the immigrants are coming to take our limited resources.
Pero nosotros afirmamos que es falso.
And we say that that's not true.
Lo que hay es gran desigualdad, grandes propiedades. En nuestro caso, por ejemplo, bancos que tienen todavía miles de viviendas vacías.
So what we say is that actually there's huge inequality already, and that in our city, in our country, there's banks that have thousands of empty properties and housing that are not being used.
Y hay mucho dinero porque, de hecho, el gobierno español ha salvado a los bancos que estafaron a la población con miles y miles de millones que les ha regalado gratis para salvar a los bancos, ¿no? Pero luego dicen que no se puede salvar vidas humanas, ¿no?
So there's actually a lot of money. It's not true that there's no money because the Spanish government rescued the banks in Spain with billions of euros, and it just gave them billions of euros for nothing in return after the crisis. And that now they say that they don't have any money for housing or for immigrants, and it's not true.
Pero sí que es verdad que no es fácil porque quien ahora tiene el poder de cambiar la gestión del dinero que ha ido a los bancos o las leyes que pueden forzar que las viviendas vacías de los bancos sean para las personas, eso lo tiene el gobierno central, ¿no?
But it's not easy for us because the power to force those banks to release that empty housing for use for housing is a power of the central government.
Entonces, nuestra tarea es explicar la verdad, que hay miles de viviendas vacías, que hay miles de millones que se utilizan para rescatar a los ricos y a los corruptos y no para salvar a la gente.
So our job in the city is to explain that to people so that they know that
o sea, que hay dinero y hay
that
pisos.
there is money and there is housing, and that actually it's a question of political will.
Yes.
And not competition for resources.
So this point, I just want to make that we heard it yesterday too. We understand that all over this country, immigrants have been turned into the demonic force that somehow undermined the American middle class and took away people's possibilities for a decent future for their families. It's the exact other way around. The immigrants had nothing to do with that. It was Wall Street. It was the federal government favoring the wealthy. This example from Spain is resonant with our example. We've got to turn the blame back where it belongs. Point it to Washington, point it to my city too, down to Wall Street, and help people understand that immigrant on the corner is not your enemy. They're the victim of the same thing you're the victim of.
Yes.
We're going to wrap up. I know Yulene had a quick comment. Michael's going to give us one more reflection. I have one more. Take it away.
Just one quick thing. What Ana was talking about is it's important because it provides us with a landscape of problems that we all have in our cities. So she has it in Barcelona, I have it in San Juan, you have it in Stockton, you have it in New York. So it's a common agenda. But we cannot forget, and I get this a lot in Puerto Rico, we're not pure. Even Jesus struck people away from the temple. He lost his temper. You know, so if we're looking for purity in this path that we're pushing forward, we're going to be disappointed. There will be times when we are going to be at odds. There will be, ¿cómo se dice incongruencias en inglés? Incongruences? Oh.
That was easy.
Yeah. You know, there will be things like the Amazon situation where we have to sit down and talk to one another. And I met the fellow last night. He's a very nice young man, very eager to help. So I know he's coming from a good place when he made that comment. But we have to make sure that we sit down because, look, we have the right that is against us. So let's not have the left divide us. Let's just push forward together.
So
Just briefly, I would say again, I've enjoyed myself these past 2 days, but I also recognize I have to go back to a community where 24% of people are living in poverty, or go back to a nation when 1 in 2 Americans can't afford one $500 emergency, meaning that the work we do today isn't defined by how we feel, but it's defined by tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after. So I just want to underscore that because I feel all good and excited, but on Monday I have to roll up my sleeves and figure out how do we deal with these real pressing structural issues in our country. And the second to last thing I'll say is that I'm often cognizant in rooms like this that it's a luxury to be able to theorize and talk about the issues, but actually living them and feeling the very real reality of what it's like to not be able to afford health care, or what is it really like to be facing eviction, or what's it really like to be homeless is a whole different understanding. So I hope we don't feel bad about the privileges we have, but we put purpose to it and continue to push and push our nation forward. And the last thing I would say is that I'm especially thankful for the time in Stockton, because the conversations I have about progressive values oftentimes aren't with people who would call themselves progressives. I have progressive conversations with people who have O'Reilly Factor mugs. I have progressive conversations with people who probably voted for the current president. And I share that to say I think the mark of a true progressive or a true person who just wants to move the country forward is that you're willing and able to engage in a dialogue with everybody. Because whether they agree with it or not, everyone benefits from things like tuition-free college. Whether they agree with it or not, everyone benefits from things like affordable or universal Medicare for all and things of that sort. So I would challenge us to continue to resist, but not resist in a way that I won't engage, but resist and know we're on this earth together. We will engage. We will have difficult conversations, because it's easy to be progressive in a bubble, but it's hard to be progressive in a reality where everyone may not think, read, or believe the same way you do.
Amen.
Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
A lot of our opponents degrade people and disrespect people and divide people. But progressives should never do the same inadvertently, to Michael's point. If we're not talking to people, including working class folks who have felt a lot of pain, and as a lot of people said in the last 24 hours, voted out of their anger and their frustration, and they thought they were voting against the status quo. Turned out, didn't work out that way. But they thought they were, a lot of them honestly. Put aside those whose motivations are fundamentally broken and racist and in other ways lost. A whole lot of people voted out of pain and frustration. And if we're not talking to them, we're not a progressive movement that values all people. I want to offer that thought. And the last thing I want to say, I want to be purposefully provocative as we end here. So it's December 1st, 2018. In 14 months, a very, very important day. Mark it down today. Note it on your calendars. February 3rd, 2020, the Iowa caucuses. February 3rd, 2020. Write it down. Think about it. Get excited for a moment, and then put it aside. And I'll tell you why. Because what we just talked about is the changes that we need to make in 2019 in our communities before we even get to the exciting, dramatic, powerful 2020 election. We've got a lot of work to do. And every time we make a change in our community, people start to believe that change can happen. If we do the right things locally in 2019, we can own 2020 as progressives. That's what we should commit ourselves to. Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Well, right on it.
Really nice.